What SEC schools can you just simply not win a national title at no matter what happens? Be it lack of financial support, which really is what results in average facilities, and or recruiting base. So already on the board, we have Kentucky and Arkansas. So Kentucky and Arkansas are two programs that, well, Kentucky values basketball every bit as much as football. Arkansas values basketball almost as much as football. Those two programs, if the greatest coach in the history of man stepped in and became the head coach of the Razorbacks or Wildcats, could either one of those two teams, given what they have and their tradition or lack thereof, win a national title? My answer would be no.
Yeah, with those two specifically, I'm a pretty big no also. I can't speak for Arkansas or Kentucky. I can speak on their recruiting grounds. I can't speak for their facilities. Dave, you might know more than I. You would know more than me on that. I would say if you compared them, Arkansas has a better chance because they could go into Texas with the right coach and maybe get some talent from there. Because as we know, Fayetteville, I mean, until Oklahoma and Texas join the SEC, Arkansas seems so much like not an SEC school because it's so far west. It's basically Texas. And so I would give Arkansas a bit of a chance. I don't see any way possible Kentucky could. But by the way, Kentucky fans are claiming a national championship right now. They claim they've won one. They claim 1950. Look it up, even though they lost to Tennessee that year.
That's true. I will say Arkansas, no. And I want to mention the 98 team that Arkansas had. And that 98 team was going to play for a national title had they beaten Tennessee, but they weren't able to do that because of a fumble by Clint Sterner in Neyland Stadium, and that changed basically everything. So I don't think that Arkansas could win it moving forward because the two programs that are entering the SEC in Texas and Oklahoma have taken away your best sales pitch at Arkansas. So your best sales pitch at Arkansas was, hey, you're in Texas in this league that's falling apart. Come play in the SEC. Well, they've lost that angle. So they can't go into Texas and Oklahoma, mostly Texas, and pull those kids. So I'm going to include Arkansas in there as well, and I'll include Kentucky. Listen, Tennessee is not the most recruiting fertile ground in the nation by far, and Caleb, we've discussed that before. But it is close to Atlanta. It's close to a growing area in Nashville, and they have a brand of football that supersedes Kentucky and many of the programs in the SEC. Kentucky doesn't have that. The recruiting ground just it's probably that or West Virginia, probably the two worst states in recruiting that I've covered on a personal level. So I don't think Kentucky, no matter who walked in the door, and as a matter of fact, Paul Bear Bryant did walk in the door, and they were not a national power then, and they lost him to Alabama. That's the other
They
thing.
were a national power. They just didn't, and they claim a national champion, but it wasn't an AP national championship, so it's not a real one.
Right. So they when I think national power, I think creating that tradition for years. And the bottom line is, it's in the mindset of Kentucky fans to be better at basketball. That's more important, and that's part of the reason that Paul Bear Bryant left. So we're going way back there. But Travis, Travis says Kentucky and Arkansas. We have Smoky Mountain Red said, I have no idea what attracts a recruit to live in Columbia, South Carolina. Horrible town. Now you don't really like that town either.
I hate the area around the stadium. I can't speak for the whole town, but I hate the area around the stadium. It's the dullest, most boring, end of the world place. Like
in the train yard. I mean, like literally, trains are running past it.
Yeah.
I can get that, and I think that's all a factor when it comes to recruiting. And I know they've undergone some upgrades, and Steve Spurrier really helped because their facilities were way, way, way behind, and now they've gotten significantly better. So let's be clear: nobody other than Vanderbilt in the SEC has horrible facilities. But I'm talking about the difference of you show up and you're a player for lunch, and you can choose between filet, shrimp, and salmon. as opposed to a hamburger. I'm talking about places that have a 120-yard indoor facility and have had those for 20 years, and have other facilities that have state-of-the-art type of therapeutic and recovery departments that will help you bounce back from injuries. That's what I'm talking about. So we're talking about the elite of the elite. So let's move forward and in programs that certainly could not win. So obviously Vanderbilt's on there. I don't even think we need to spend time discussing that. But other programs that simply could not win in the SEC. And let's include what's going to be the SEC. That would be, of course, Texas and Oklahoma. I think you and I would both agree they could win a national title. No,
Yeah.
okay, so, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say I agree. And I want to say up front to all of these programs, any program could get to a point to where they could win a national title, but we're talking about right now, given what they are, no coach could win it because of, like you said, other extenuating factors. We bring up South Carolina. If South Carolina did upgrade their facilities, did upgrade their recruiting budget, did somehow find a way to get ahead of the curve the way Clemson did, then we might be having a different story. But you're right now, they're not there. So no coach in the world could probably win a title at South Carolina.
Well, and not really to quibble in details, but I would take that a step further. I don't care what happens at South Carolina. They're not winning a national title. I mean, if you have Steve Spurrier show up and they increase the recruiting budget and they improve the facilities and they still couldn't win the SEC East, you're talking about one of the greatest coaches of all time, and they couldn't even win the SEC East. So I'll just go ahead and say it. South Carolina is never going to be able to win a national title no matter who shows up. I guess things could change. I mean, I don't know what those things would be. Maybe a global warming causes it to be an oceanfront town and prospects love it. I mean, we could go really obscure, but as far as any time in my lifetime, it's just not going to happen. Now, I don't want to just rule out programs flippantly by the same token, because in the 80s, Florida was awful. And I think you and I would agree that they could win a national title. They have. LSU in the 90s was horrible. It's a train wreck, poor administration. They can win a national title, no question about it. So I don't want to be flippant short term, but I think that South Carolina is just one of those that's on the outs looking in. And Arthur's saying, I think Arkansas is a very good football team. I'm not sure about agreeing with Dave or Caleb about not being able to win a national championship. Kentucky is in a different story. I'm in a big disappointment. Tennessee losing to South Carolina. Again, this is not about one game. Okay, so I want to be real clear. Caleb and I are not harping over the South Carolina game last year, nor is South Carolina an equal program because they won one game. Okay, Missouri.
No, Missouri, I say absolutely can't. I'm going to be honest. So it's funny because we talk about Homer media, and Dave and I are not homers at all. We try to be as objective as possible. I feel like Missouri media is anti-Homer media, if that makes sense. They go out of their way. Do you ever read local reporting in Missouri? Because they're such a journalism school, they go out of their way to bash their football team as much as possible, to take the stance of, we're journalists and we hold them to account because we're Columbia. And
I think there's some of that. To be real honest with you, at Florida, because it has a good journalism school.
Yeah.
More of a broadcasting school, I would say. And I think there's some of that in Knoxville at Tennessee, because it's a bigger city. You're up around the top 50 market. So I think there's more competition to get stuff out there. Now, you still have plenty of homers in Tennessee. Don't get me wrong. You should check recruiting rankings for that. But as far as other schools, let me throw some at you that I think we may disagree on. And I'm curious. And Smoky Mountain Red saying that Mizzou claims 1 or 2 championships. I understand, but that's when there were 15,000 polls. There's something called the Dunkel poll that Tennessee claims. We're talking about real championships.
We're talking about right now and going forward, not like where programs were in the past.
Yes. Okay. So, and then I want to throw 2 at you that we might disagree on: Ole Miss and Mississippi State.
No, I agree with you fully on both. I think there's a great story. Apparently, there was a debate. Ole Miss and Mississippi State were supposed to be one school in the late 1800s. If they were stayed one school, they would have been a national power because Mississippi's relative to population is actually a pretty good recruiting ground. But when you got two schools fighting, no, not happening. And I want to bring this up. Ole Miss was a powerhouse right up until, and I mean right before the SEC integrated. And Ole Miss, I mean, you guys can feel what you want about Colonel Reb and South will rise again and all of that. That didn't sit well with a lot of national recruits after the SEC was integrating. I don't care how you feel about it as a fan. You got to think about how recruits felt about it. And that wrecked the program.
Oh, that didn't sit well with a lot of recruits as late as the 2000s. You know, they were still debating whether or not to have the rebel flag at games. So, I mean, I think that was a factor way during our lifetimes for sure.
I agree. And it was a national power that wrecked the program. You cannot convince me that did not wreck the program and make it impossible after integration for Ole Miss to ever become a national championship program again because of that.
So is that pretty much our list? Because I don't see, that maybe the closest that some people would look at would possibly be Auburn, but they've won a national title. They had a very special player, and I think that's one
they almost won another one too.
Yeah, and I think that Auburn has more funding sometimes than people believe. So I think that's kind of a perception that's out there. But I mean, they can win a national title. They've proven it. So I would certainly, I guess that would be the closest moving forward that I could even think of. But strike that. I mean, they're definitely in the haves category, not the have-nots. So that's where we are: Kentucky, Arkansas, Vanderbilt, Missouri, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State.
South Carolina, right?
Oh, in South Carolina. Yeah, goodness gracious. That's what started the conversation because those that thought that I was Captain Homer, which is fine. So South Carolina, I don't think can win a national title. So I think that's pretty much where we are as far as the haves and have-nots, the teams that can win a national title and those that can't. I don't think there's an awful lot of debate. I think it's a pretty bold line between those two different groups of teams.
Yeah. Well, with them coming to the SEC, Longhorn fans would like to point out, and I'm going to speak for them for a minute, they would like to point out that I don't think Texas A&M has a national championship to their name. Despite all the talk about how Texas A&M is as a powerful program, Texas A&M has never actually hit the pinnacle. And we know Bear Bryant went to Texas A&M, didn't come close to a national title, won the Southwest a couple of times. But I know they have the largest NIL collective, but I'm just saying, given the money A&M has, given the state it's in, I'll go with this far. Texas A&M is the most underachieving college football program in history. It's mind-boggling that they don't have at least 3 national championships to their name.
Well, I'm going to sound like the old guy in the room. There was a time when they were so overshadowed by Texas, and this goes way back, that was always a bugaboo. That was the fly in the ointment because they were so overshadowed by Texas. And then you would have Oklahoma coming into the state that would pull prospects that Texas didn't want. So I understand why they're not considered a year in, year out national title contender aside from who may be the coach. We're not talking about current states in time. We're talking about over decades. I get it, but you're right. There's too much money there that if you don't make some correct decisions, there's too much talent there that if you don't make some correct decisions, you shouldn't have 3 or 4 national titles. I mean, Tennessee has what do you officially count it as? Because I know Tennessee likes to say 9, 2 according to the AP. What do you officially count it as?
I go with the official 6, like the official claimed one. So I go 38, 39, 40. None of those were AP national titles, but guys, they went undefeated, untied, and unscored on in the regular season of 39. How do you not call that a national championship caliber team? And so I go 38, 39, 40, 50, 51, and 98. I don't go 67. A lot of them claim 1967. Tennessee went 9-2 that year, lost the opener to UCLA. They weren't the best. USC, I think, was the best team in college football that year.